Hi guys, welcome to another podcast here where we're talking about our skill of the week. We are still here without power, so sorry for that. We're a little bit in the shadows, but we're really excited to talk to you about the next set of skills of the week for October. This time we're going to be talking about 4 different skills, and again we're going to talk about what it looks like at school, how we teach this at school, and some ideas and tips for home. So we're going to start with following directions. This is one that every adult in the world loves to know about. How can I teach this? Because I think this is like a common universal difficulty for kids to want to follow direction, especially if it has something to do with what they don't want to do. So this is a really pivotal thing for us to teach at school, right? So what are some things, with me today, I should introduce my guests. I have Miss Griffith, MJ. She has been a teacher and she's currently our coach. And we have Miss Eschler. She's going to go by Anna in the podcast. And she's also our instructional coach here. So they have a unique perspective in that they help kids, but they also help our teachers be able to develop skills too. So they have some really great perspectives. So anyway, following directions.
I think following directions, if you cannot, number one, it's one of the most important things you can teach to your child, especially in school, because if they're not able to follow directions, then nothing is really being learned. Like following directions can be as simple as showing them. So first, when I teach following directions, I always model it and show them how to do something. So when I taught kindergarten, my students did not know how to sit in their desks yet. That's how simple you sometimes have to go with your child. And so I showed them how to sit in their desk, what I called it learning position, how they would sit when they were ready to learn. And so I modeled that step by step, and then we practiced it step by step. And then I was able to say, everybody sit in learning position in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then because they knew that, they could then follow the directions. So a lot of times if kids are not following directions, it's because they don't sometimes know how to do that because we have maybe missed a step or not taught them.
I think that's a really good thing to bring up. A lot of times we just think kids aren't following directions because they're being naughty. And that's usually not the case. Usually it's because they don't know how to follow that direction.
Right. And even at home, if you're at home, we do the same thing at school. If we're going to give a direction to our class or just one student, we wait until they're ready. And so if they're not looking at you, you can give directions and they may be thinking about something else, but then they don't know what to do. So at home, one of the things you can do is say their name, make sure they're looking at you. Don't just, if you just say, clean your room, and you don't know if they heard you or not, they may not do it. But if you say their name, have them look at you, say you need to clean your room, then it's going to be easier for them to follow those directions because you know they've actually heard you.
In the last podcast, we talked about how also sometimes it's really helpful to have the students or your children repeat what they heard. Because what I have found is that sometimes kids hear part of the direction, but not the full direction. So then I can repeat it again of, oh, that was so great. You got 2 of the 3, but you missed the brush your teeth part. So I think then that can help avoid a lot of conflict either at school or at home because you know exactly what they missed and you can reteach it before they go off and forget something.
And I think practicing over and over, if your child is struggling with knowing how to do something like tie a shoe, you don't just eventually give up, I don't think, and buy him Velcro shoes. You just need to break it up into steps and practice that over and over. And I think that's something we just need to keep doing. If they're struggling with something at school, we need to pull it apart into deeper levels so that they can really understand how to do those steps. And at home, that would be the same thing. So if they keep not cleaning their room correctly, maybe it's time to sit down and help them learn how to clean it the way that you're hoping it to be cleaned and break it up step by step. And then maybe they can have that success. And making it fun. I think the more fun we make it to follow those directions and help them to see the value in it and why we're having them do certain things and telling them the why. Kids are very smart and they love to know the why.
Yeah, and making them feel successful.
So one thing that I also talk a lot about is we have a lot of students that have some what we call executive functioning issues. Executive functioning means our brain is not naturally getting things. One of them is organizing steps or knowing how to prioritize what needs to be done. And so some of these students who have some struggles with executive functioning might not be able to know how to process the directions we've given them. So this is something that I've had to do, and I'm sorry I bring up my home a lot, but That's what I know as a parent. I do have a son with ADHD. And so I have had to actually make checklists for him of how to make his room. And so it was like just a step by step by step. So it was visual. It was the same every time. And I laminated it so he could just check it off. And that really helped him become more successful. And after he used the checklist a handful of times, it became a more natural thing. So then I could just say, hey, go clean your room. And then I didn't have to do the step by step by step. But we did have to start at first, step by step by step. And I know that there are some parents who've talked about even like showering, that they've had to have like a checklist of what to do in taking care of yourself. So that's a tool that's really helpful if you do have a student who has maybe some, it works well for autism or ADHD or ODD. So if you have a student who struggles with some of those things, that's just a clinical tool that can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm. I did the same thing with my children when they were younger, and I didn't have children with those issues. But it was very helpful when they knew my expectations, because then I wasn't frustrated that they didn't meet my expectations, because they knew exactly what they needed to do to clean the bathroom or things like that. So, yeah.
And also remember that it's always okay to go back and reteach, because we've talked a lot about expectations, and that's a natural human thing for us to see if we can skip some corners as we go on. So if you find your buddies skipping some corners, go back and do that reteach and show them step by step of how to follow those directions again. Okay. The next skill that we're going to be doing is called stay on task. And at first, you might think, oh, that is just going to be a school skill. And it is an essential school skill, but we'll talk about how this can be at home and why it's important there too. Okay, so thoughts about staying on task?
I think staying on task is another thing where sometimes we think kids are not following directions or they're not doing what we want them to do. But I think it's one of those things that we have to teach. What does staying on task look like? And we need to set the expectation, and we need to set up what happens when, like, what does it look like when you've accomplished this? Like, what is their goal? Like, helping kids to know what the goal is so they know why they're staying on task and what they're working towards, I think is very important.
And I think it's important, too, that you know the child's ability level, because a kindergartner is not going to stay on task for as long as a fourth grader will. And so I think you'll have less frustration if you give them a achievable length of time that they need to be on the task. And if they need to take a little break and then get back on task, but as long as you're aware of that.
Right. Really good teachers to teach stay on task will actually show like a finished product. So they're like, okay, so this is how this student knew that it was done. They had all the details in, or they did A, B, C, and D. So I think carrying that at home, like to really show how a task is complete. Like if you give a chore to a student, you're going to show them that I know that this job is done because all of these things are finished. So if they have to feed the dog, you know that it's finished because the dog has food, they have water, all the random bits of the food have been picked up, and the dog food was closed. So I think like letting them know what the end product is really helpful.
Kind of like a checklist again.
Yeah.
A little bit.
And I think sometimes too, just the biggest thing to remember is that every kid is different, and that when you think of staying on task, another way to look at it as well is to be able to work for a duration of time and not stop. So if they need to read for 10 minutes, but you notice they have a 1 minute attention span, how do you help them to be able to stay on task for longer and longer amounts of time? So learning to chunk it for the kids, say, okay, yesterday you read for a minute, let's see if you can read for a minute and a half today. Or this is what this looks like. And then maybe you get a break. So you're going to work for 5 minutes and then you're going to get a 1 minute break. But staying on task means like it might look different for every kid. They might need it broken up so they with little breaks, but eventually you're going to you have this goal of like where you want them to be. And I think that's important too, is breaking it up so that they know what staying on task, because if it's something they have to do for a long period of time, they might need help to get to that point.
Yeah, and when I was teaching first grade, we just called it our stamina for writing, when we were teaching writing. And so we would write, and as soon as someone would get off task, then that's where we ended. So it's like, oh, we went for 2 minutes today, tomorrow let's try to do 3 minutes. And so I think you can make it fun too, make it a challenge to see how far they can go.
I like that. And that can also be applied for homework. Staying on task during homework is something that I have a lot of parents coming and talking about and saying, I have so much fighting from my kids at home about how to do homework. So remember that you don't have to sit at home and do an hour's worth of homework. We don't want that. Kids are here for 7 hours a day, so we don't want them to go do a whole nother hour at home either. We want it to be age appropriate for them. And what most research shows is about 10 minutes per grade level. So like a kindergartner should be about 5 minutes of homework at a time. A first grader could be about 10 minutes of homework at a time. So kind of chunking that up. If your student can do more, then go at their pacing. But if they need a break, more research shows that taking quick breaks of just 10 seconds is all we need, of just closing our eyes, taking a deep breath in, telling ourselves we can do it, which goes along with our next skill, is actually going to help them stay on task longer. So just making kids push and push and push and push can also kind of reduce their ability to stay on task. So letting them know that staying on task doesn't mean that you just stay in one spot the whole time. It can be and we do this as adults. Like, how often are we in the middle of a project and we get up and go walk around, take a drink of water, and then get right back to it?
Get a snack.
Right. So those are some things that will also help with that staying on task.
I like that.
Yep.
Okay, so our next one, which I was just talking about, is called growth mindset. This is something that we've heard in the community more and more and more over the past 10 years, though it's a philosophy that's been around since the 70s. So growth mindset is talking about how we can do hard things and changing our mindset and the self-talk we have about difficult tasks. So there's a fixed mindset, which means those are the kind of the language of, I can't do this. This is too hard for me. I'll never get this. And that's our brain just being able to shut down and not think and not being able to handle challenges. Whereas a growth mindset challenges our thinking and being able to tell ourselves that we can do hard things. So this is something that schools are incorporating all over the nation and all over the world to help students be able to handle these challenges that come their way, because life is hard. And so kids need to know how to be able to go about in the world using a growth mindset.
I think a lot of that, and the reason why I like growth mindset is because growing up, you start seeing the world through your own eyes, and sometimes you do get into a place where you're like, oh, I'm just this way, or my family does this, or we do this, or I'm dumb. You pick up on these little cues, and I think teaching a growth mindset is so cool at home and at school, because it shows that, like, I haven't got it yet. I may not be able to do this, but I haven't got it yet, and that's okay. But like, I can do whatever I want to do, but it might take some work. So it doesn't take the work out of it. It doesn't, like, it hypes up the work, if anything, because they're like, oh, I can do this if I really want to do this. So I think helps kids to be excited to do hard things and doesn't make them feel like they've already failed. Because I think sometimes we already have this I've already failed attitude sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that the students or your children are looking to you or their teachers as that example. So if they make a mistake and we scold them, or we say, oh, you just don't get it, instead of saying, wow, you did so great at this part, you just don't have this skill yet. So let's do what we can do to work on it and learn it. So they're going to look to you as an example if you have a growth mindset, so you can work on it yourself.
Right. Yep. And this also goes with, we don't use the word smart at school anymore. We talk about our brains getting stronger because it's a muscle. And even though it's not like a muscle like our bicep, it is an organ that can change and develop. It's not set. And a lot of brain research is showing that all these new connections are being made when kids are challenging themselves and with that positive self-talk. So that's just something at home. And instead of saying, wow, you're so smart, because that seems fixed, you can say, wow, you did this. I bet your brain grew and it became stronger. But on the other hand, if your kid's refusing to do things, you can also talk about that muscle development of, wow, when we don't try, how is that impacting our muscles? Our muscles are becoming slightly weaker. What can we do to change that? And that's actually really helped since I've been using this language at school, taking a lot of that self-confidence and boosting it up instead of kids just shutting down and saying, I can't do it, I'm dumb.
Right. And I think, too, pointing out specific things. I try, instead of saying, great job, or you did awesome, you say, oh, you did such a wonderful job adding those two numbers together. Show me you can do it again. Or I can really tell that you're learning a lot in first grade. And I think that kind of language is more helpful because it's specific. It doesn't seem just general.
Well, and one thing I would say, sorry if I cut you off, but helping them to see that mistakes are okay. So that means that you're modeling that at home. Like if you make a mistake, or if you even, like you could say, if you got angry at them, you're like, you know what? I did not like how I responded to you. I have not got it yet how I want it to look like when I'm feeling frustrated. So we're going to try that again. But like saying that mistakes are okay. So if your kid doesn't do something right or misses something or makes a mistake, you say, that means we get to learn from that. Like, what can we learn from that mistake? This is so exciting. You made a mistake. Let's fix it and see what we can do a little bit different next time. And I think that builds their confidence too, because they're able to see that mistakes are okay, because they are. We all make mistakes.
And as an adult, it is a bit of a hard attitude shift, mental shift. If you don't already have that attitude, it's hard, but it's very worthwhile to.
And sometimes it's hard to share that with the kids because we want to look like we know what we're doing and we're all put together. But that's really when we can say, wow, I need to practice this a little bit more. Or I don't know that, but here's what I'm going to do to learn it. And so now that this also will really work well if you have students who are involved in any kind of sports, or like my kids do music, learning to read. So any kind of hobby that they're trying to develop, if we don't give up. If it's something you don't love, that's one thing, then yeah, don't do it. But if it's something that, like if you really want to be the best soccer player, we've got to use this growth mindset. We've got to practice. We've got to do hard things. And then at some point in time, we're going to get better. So that's kind of how you can use that at home as well.
I love that.
Okay, our last one is called Stop, Walk, Check, Talk. All around the nation, this is part of a push of what we call PBIS, which is Positive Behavior Intervention Systems and Supports. I've changed this a little bit at our school, and I included the check part of it. So you might hear or see some other schools talk about stop, walk, talk, and it's essentially the same thing. So what this is it's a way to solve conflict without becoming aggressive. So the way that this works is if somebody's being disrespectful, we tell them to stop, and we do ask them to do the stop sign, because as adults, if we're outside and we see this, we're going to go walk right on over and see what's going on. So they say stop, and then we ask them to walk away from the situation, because you're not going to have disrespect happening if you're not there. Then once you walk away, the check part is I want students to be asking a couple of questions. First of all, did I do something to lead to that disrespect? A lot of times kids are not self-reflective because it's learning. And so they might have said something about, someone's mom, and the other kid got mad and said something right back. So we're teaching students, if you did something that was disrespectful, you have an obligation to apologize in that. Because very rarely do we just see people just being disrespectful for no reason. There's something at the root of that usually. Not always, but usually. The next part is checking to, the next three are kind of just for more safety purposes, but first to ask if somebody is hurt or could be hurt. The next question is if this is a problem that's too big to handle on your own. So like if there's a fire or a fight, then that's something I have to go immediately get an adult for. And the last one is this a problem I've tried to handle and I haven't been able to solve it on my own? So this really falls into like those bullying situations where this student has said stop and done the walk a lot and it's still a harassment issue. Then we need to become involved with that. So then if the answer is yes to those three questions, you move to go talk to an adult so an adult can help you solve that. We also really like to teach kids that if you use stop, walk, check, talk, and it takes care of your problems, you solved a problem. You don't now need to go tattle about it. You can inform and say, hey, this happened at recess, but I solved my problem. So this is a way to kind of help with tattling too. So,
yeah. And teaching your children the same thing and enforcing that at home is great with siblings and things like that. And also as parents, not to just to practice that yourself is when your children are arguing or fighting or something's happened to actually like stop, see what happened, talk to them about it before just jumping to a conclusion. Because again, they're going to watch you. They're going to take those examples from you.
And I think how we talk to our children, I know growing up, if whatever my parents did was kind of what I thought was right, right? And so if we lose our tempers quite a bit, or we're being upset a lot and we're not using skills to calm down, then we're putting our frustration onto kids. And we choose how we act with our feelings of anger, right? And so it's helpful to like even stop, check, walk, check, talk ourselves, because then we're modeling that for them too when we're feeling frustrated. Because that's a powerful thing I've seen my siblings do with their kids is, you know what, I didn't like the way I spoke to you right then. I was feeling angry. So then they were able to go stop, walk, check, and talk and themselves. And I've seen at school, I think teachers can model this as well. If they're feeling frustrated, if they're able to model this for kids as well, like, hey, this happened, and let's all talk about it as a class. And just, I think the more kids see this, I think we're going to improve communities and homes, because really it's taking responsibility for what is happening and not just letting ourselves just be angry. And I think that just is amazing.
Yeah, and also I think the adults in the children's lives, because some children are just little people, and I think sometimes we forget that they're actually little human beings and they have feelings, and when we are listening to them and showing them that respect, hopefully they will take that and show that respect to each other and feel like they have a voice.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us today. This has been another great podcast. I really appreciate our staff here. They're super fantastic. So always feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about any of these skills, or if you have some thoughts about it as well. We would love to share parent tips. We're going to be actually adding a place where we can share those as well, because you guys have amazing things that you can do to improve things in the community too, and we want to hear about that. Thanks so much, and have a great day.